In the year 2009, a shocking murder rocked Taita County. The victim was a man who had made history by giving the world something it had never seen before. His death was brutal, calculated, and said to be tied to forces far more powerful than anyone wanted to admit. But why would anyone want this 72-year-old man dead? The answer lies beneath the earth, in something rare and beautiful, something that some people are willing to kill for. This is the story of Campbell Rodney Bridges. Welcome back to the Crime Gist. My name is Damisa. Campbell Bridges was born in Britain on 25th August 1937 to a Scottish mother and English father. But when he was only 2 weeks old, his family moved to Johannesburg, South Africa. From his earliest years, Africa would become his home, and what lay beneath the African soil would become his obsession. His father, R.J. Bridges, was the chief geologist for the UK's Central Mining and Investment Corporation. This was one of the world's largest mining groups. So, growing up in the shadow of a father who read the earth like others read books, young Campbell developed what would become a legendary eye for geology. While other kids played with toys, Campbell was already learning to distinguish the quartz from the feldspar, the garnet from the tourmaline, etc. As a young adult, he went on to study and attain a degree in geology at the University of Witwatersrand. In uni, he met an American lady named Judith through a mutual friend. He didn't know it at the time, but this would be his future wife. Even after his degree in geology, Campbell Bridges chose to stay in Africa, working in different countries across this continent he considered home. But it was a chance encounter with danger while working in one of these African countries that would change his life forever. In 1961, Campbell was working in Zimbabwe, then known as Rhodesia, locating and assessing beryl deposits. One day, he set out to explore a range of hills near his camp. From his own first-hand account of it, as he was climbing up a hill, an old rock buffalo charged out of the bush at him. He jumped down into a gully. The buffalo followed him along the edge of the ravine for a while, then gave up and went off into the bush. But it was there, while his face was pressed against a rock and in the midst of danger, that an outcrop containing small, bright green crystals caught his attention. This was his first encounter with the green grossular garnet. He had never seen a green like it. It was pure in every sense. He escaped the buffalo that day, but whenever he went, the green gem remained a tantalizing memory. He sought to find it again by all means. Luckily, destiny wasn't quite finished with Campbell Bridges. In 1967, Campbell made his second discovery of the green grossular garnet, this time in northern Tanzania, in a small hidden valley just over 100 kilometers southwest of Kilimanjaro. This was an area that was heavily infested with tsetse. He immediately got a mining license there and began mining this green garnet and other minerals like the Tanzanite. But Campbell's Tanzanian dream didn't last long. Unfortunately for him, he was only able to mine at that location for just 3 years when, in 1970, President Julius Nyerere of Tanzania nationalized all mines. This was part of a broader wave of African resource nationalism at the time. This movement, seen mostly in the 60s and 70s, was driven by factors such as African nations wanting control over their natural resources, which had been exploited by colonial and foreign companies for decades. Most governments wanted some post-independence sovereignty and were unhappy with the level of participation of indigenous populations in the national economy, particularly in the mining sector. Julius Nyerere, Tanzania's president, promoted African socialism, also known as Ujamaa, and believed natural resources should benefit the nation rather than foreign companies. Thus, the move to nationalize this sector in Tanzania in 1970. After losing his Tanzanian mine, Campbell Bridges headed for Kenya that same year, 1970, in search of the Greenstone. He had a hunch that some of these gemstones he found in Tanzania would stretch across the border into Kenya. He used colonial maps to trace the geological seam northwards, hoping for a repeat discovery. Fortunately for Campbell, his geological expertise paid off. The next year, in 1971, he discovered other minerals like the Tanzanite, tourmaline, and ruby in Kenya in Taita Taveta County, close to the Tsavo National Park. So, Bridges officially registered this discovery and purchased mining rights. He could now exclusively mine these minerals he had discovered in Taita Taveta. His mining claims covered approximately 2,000 acres of land. Kenya would become a home where the Bridges would live and work for the next 4 decades. And this area of Taita Taveta was interesting. Being so close to nature, deadly cobras were not Campbell's only threat. He had to fend off brown scorpions and some wild animals as well. In his early years of mining, Campbell lived in a treehouse 25 feet above the ground at this mining location. By this time, he was married to Judith, the lady he had met in South Africa. In those early years in Kenya, Judith and Campbell Bridges stayed in this treehouse together. The Bridges named their mine the Scorpion Mine in 1971. As you can guess, this mine got its name from the numerous and extremely large scorpions found in the area. Campbell then incorporated 2 companies, namely the Bridges Exploration Company and the First Green Garnet Mining Company, under which he carried out the business of mining and exporting gemstones, becoming Africa's biggest gemstone provider. They produced some of the largest pockets of the green grossular garnet in the world. Campbell went on to be the founding member of the International Colored Gemstone Association, the founding chairman and committee member of the Kenya Chamber of Mines, and the vice chairman of the Kenya Gemstone Dealers Association. Although a lover of all gems, Bridges often spoke of the green garnet in terms of romance. In late 1973, Henry B. Platt, the then president of Tiffany & Co., who had taken a keen interest in Campbell's discoveries, decided that it was time to give this green gem a trade name. Since the deposits were found near Kenya's celebrated Tsavo National Park, Mr. Platt and Campbell Bridges baptized this green garnet the tsavorite. A Tiffany's ad from 1974 debuted the tsavorite, featuring Campbell and crediting him as the resourceful explorer, without whom this gem would have remained a secret. In December 1978, Campbell and Judith welcomed a baby boy they named Bruce Bridges, and later a daughter, Laura Bridges, born in the 80s. The Bridges had a good life in Kenya for the next couple of years, raising their family under the scorching heat of Taita Taveta. By the time the year 2000 rolled in, the kids, Bruce and Laura, were all grown. Bruce Bridges was by now taking a keen interest in mining and in the family business as a whole. But as the years went by, the success of this mine made the Bridges a target for a large organized crime syndicate. In the 2000s, local residents developed an interest in mining, and some of them even set up companies in order to mine and sell gemstones. But in the year 2006, the Bridges discovered something fishy. Some illegal mining activities were taking place on their concession. They estimated that these illegal mining operations led to the extraction of materials worth millions of dollars. The Bridges, on behalf of their company, the First Green Garnet Mining Company of Kenya, filed complaints with local and governmental authorities. But as it sometimes is in Kenya, justice was moving slow. For 2 years, they filed multiple complaints, but nothing was done. And with time, these illegal miners grew bolder. In 2008, they went as far as placing protection notice signs at the Scorpion Mine, bearing the name of another mining company known as Tia Akili. This notice was suggesting that this Tia Akili company was the legitimate miner. Campbell Bridges was shocked. The land on which these signs were placed had been permitted to him, to his company, the First Green Garnet Mining Company. This had been the case since the early 70s, and that had never been revoked. So who exactly was behind this Tia Akili? On further inquiry, the ownership of Tia Akili revealed the true scope of what the Bridges family was up against. Majority ownership of Tia Akili was held by a politician, the then Assistant Minister of Education in the Kenyan government. The remaining percentage of this company was held by a lady known as Regea Omar. This was quite shocking, but the Bridges pressed on with their complaints. Finally, in July of 2009, local authorities arrested some of the illegal miners. But then, without notice, the suspects were released shortly thereafter. It was rumored that a call from quote-unquote higher up made on July 21st, 2009 led to the release of these suspects. A week later, on July 27th, 2009, 2 of Bridges' security officers were abducted while on patrol on the concession. They were tied up and beaten. They were later released by their abductors with a message for Campbell, promising that they were coming for his head. Bridges told the police about these death threats he had received, but again, no real protection came. He, however, managed to get a notice to vacate the mine that he served on the so-called illegal miners on the 10th of August 2009. That same day, the Bridges were approached by a car that was said to belong to the politician who held the majority shares at Tia Akili. The men aboard this car hurled insults at the Bridges. The next day, August 11th, 2009, dawned very hot in Taita Taveta County. At 72 years old, Campbell Bridges was still strong, still driven, and still refusing to abandon what he had built for over 4 decades. At noon that day, Campbell and his now 30-year-old son, Bruce, along with 4 of their employees, drove from their camp, the Scorpion Mine, to visit Wundanyi District Commissioner. They were there to make yet another appeal for protection after the threats they had received the previous day. However, the commissioner claimed that there was not much he could do to help due to what he called pressure from above. He advised them to go report these threats to the police. After reporting to the district commissioner, Bridges and his team went ahead to report the threats to the officer commanding Wundanyi police station. There, they asked to be given police escort back to their camp since they were afraid of the persons behind the threats actualizing them. But for reasons unknown, they were not offered security. This again confirming that they were completely on their own. That afternoon, they were driving back to their camp when at Mwasui Ranch, Mwatate, within Taita Taveta County, they came across a barrier on their route consisting of trees and branches placed across the road. They drove around this barrier, but were met with yet another one a few meters ahead. This time, a trench dug along their path, almost as if it meant to prevent their vehicle from proceeding. They drove around this one too, before deciding to use another shortcut or an alternative route home. But just as they approached their destination, they met a third barrier. A big log was blocking the road. They stopped the vehicle to remove this obstacle. There and then, the trap was sprung. They heard whistles, then, suddenly, a group of men, about 20 men, emerged out of nowhere with clubs and machetes and spears. The group attacked the Bridges along with the 4 employees accompanying them. The attack was brutal, but it seemed to have mainly targeted the old man. The group caused maximum damage, then ran off. By the time the assailants were done, Campbell Bridges was in a bad state, bleeding profusely. There was a stab wound under his left arm. Bruce and the rest were also significantly injured, but they managed to place Campbell in the car and drive to Voi District Hospital. But upon arrival, he was unfortunately pronounced dead. The cause of death was a penetrating chest injury due to a sharp object, which perforated the left lung and a major blood vessel. Outcry over the murder was immediate and global. The geological community was devastated. The figure of Campbell Bridges was iconic in this industry. Those who did not know him knew of him. Bridges was a highly respected figure on the international gemstone scene. In fact, he had just received ICA's Lifetime Achievement Award for his contribution to the industry. And so, the search was on for the killers. The deputy police chief at the time, known as Leshindoro, was quoted saying, "We suspect that those who killed him are probably employees of other people who want to mine in the area, possibly some prominent political figure." With this said, the truth was glaring that this mining thing had brought him enemies with both locals and politicians. On that very day, police went to the hospital to interview the victims. That is, Bruce Bridges and the 4 employees. They had sustained multiple injuries during the attack. The whole attack occurred in broad daylight and lasted at the very minimum 30 minutes or so. None of the attackers was masked or had their faces covered. As such, the victims had ample time and opportunity to observe their attackers. Upon being questioned, the victims indicated that some of the assailants were people well known to them and locals of the area. Barely an hour after the attack, they were able to name some of these attackers. The identification was solid. Subsequently, out of the group of almost 20 attackers, 8 were apprehended in connection with the incident and jointly charged with murder. That is, Mohamed Kokane, Alfred Makoko, Samuel Mwachala, James Muita, Osman Abdi Hussein, Crispus Mukunzi, Daniel Mdachi Munene, and Regea Omar. The last accused was the same lady who held minority shares at the Tia Akili Mining Company. The 5th accused, Daniel Mdachi Munene, was said to be related to another politician, the then gender minister in the Kenyan government. Bruce insisted that the 2 politicians mentioned in this case were more than involved. They were the masterminds. He claimed to have seen a message from the gender minister to a police boss asking them to arrest the Bridges. He also believed that the majority shareholder at Tia Akili, the politician whose car had been used to threaten them, ought to have also been arrested and charged. However, this never happened. Shortly after the trial began at the High Court in Mombasa, the 8th accused person, who was the other shareholder at Tia Akili, was found to have no case to answer and was acquitted. The reason for her acquittal was that none of the eyewitnesses mentioned a woman as having been one amongst the gang who waylaid and attacked the Bridges team. The only reason that she was linked to this incident is because she was said to be a director at the Tia Akili Mining Company. In this trial, the prosecution called 21 witnesses. The case against the suspects rested on several pillars, the main one being eyewitness testimony. They all provided detailed testimony, identifying specific accused persons and describing their actions during the attack. Some witnesses identified Mohamed Kokane as holding a machete and cutting Campbell on the head above the eye. He also had another one of the attackers, Alfred Juruka, saying, "Maliza hawa wote, finish them all." Most importantly, at one point during the attack, one of the assailants, known as Salat, exclaimed, "Nimeua mzee Bridges," meaning I have killed Mr. Bridges. Salat was seen holding a long knife, which he used to stab the deceased. All the witnesses identified Salat as the person who fatally stabbed Campbell Bridges. This guy, Salat, was never found or charged. He remains at large to date. Apart from eyewitness accounts, the court also relied on the doctrine of common intention. The group was armed with dangerous and offensive weapons, while Bridges and his team were unarmed. The attack was also unprovoked. Under the law, criminal culpability does not visit only the person who committed the act in question. Equal criminal culpability lies with the person or persons who aided, abetted, or were in any other way complicit in the illegal act. In short, everyone involved is liable for murder, whether or not you did the actual killing or stabbing. In this case, common intention to harm the victim was established by virtue of the organized ambush, the weapons used, and the injuries inflicted on the victims. As part of their defenses, most of these accused persons denied being at the scene, but their alibis were found to be weak, unsupported, and contradicted by credible eyewitnesses. This case would drag on for nearly 5 years, but the week before Christmas, that is 17th December 2014, Judge Maureen Odero of Mombasa High Court was ready to deliver her verdict. The judge found 4 of the 7 defendants guilty. She convicted Mohamed Kokane, Alfred Njoroka Makoko, Samuel Mwachala, and James Chacha Mwita in the murder of 72-year-old Campbell Bridges. The 4 were sentenced to 40 years behind bars. 3 of the accused persons were acquitted, including the accused who was said to be related to the then gender minister. In fact, this politician, that is, the gender minister, was the one who provided an alibi for the accused person, saying they were together on that material day. Even if it was shown that this man had previously threatened Campbell Bridges, the court said that they had no reason to believe that his alibi, the politician, was lying. They called this politician a credible alibi. In a statement, the Bridges family expressed gratitude for the 4 convictions, saying that this would hopefully send a message that lawlessness in Kenya would not be tolerated. However, they stated that they believed that there was more than enough evidence to convict the additional 3 perpetrators who were acquitted. Bruce continued to strongly state that he believed the 2 politicians mentioned in this case were involved. Bruce requested that the several assassins that remain at large, including Salat, the individual who fatally stabbed his father, be located and charged. But for now, he was going to try and uphold and continue his father's Gemstone's legacy. The Scorpion mine had remained closed since the murder of Campbell Bridges and throughout the trial. In January 2015, it opened with a larger scale of operations than before. But 18 months later, because of incessant threats against the workers, the mine was closed again. It remains closed to this day, but Bruce Bridges continues to honor his father's memory by selling the tsavorite from the enormous inventory that Campbell stockpiled over nearly 50 years. Aside from his family, tsavorite was the love of Campbell Bridges' life and what he had dedicated his life to and lost his life over. Campbell Rodney Bridges lived for 72 years. He navigated the complex politics of colonial and post-colonial Africa for 4 decades. He survived a charging buffalo, spitting cobras in the mine shaft, the tsetse flies in Tanzania, and most importantly, he gave the world a beautiful gemstone known as the tsavorite. In the end, he died because some people wanted what he had built. Today, 4 men sit in the Kenyan prisons for his murder. Others who participated walk free, and so justice for Campbell Bridges remains incomplete. As for the Scorpion mine, it stands silent today, but every tsavorite that catches the light, whether in a ring or a pendant, is a testament to the man who gave his life to this stone. His story really does remind us that, in the scramble for African riches, whether in the colonial era or in modern day, blood has always been a part of the price. That brings us to the end of our story today. Let me hear what you think of this story down below. And as usual, please do not forget to subscribe, to like, and to share this episode with other true crime junkies like yourself. See you right here on the next one.